Welcome to episode number 12 of Broad Street Fanatics. We are here with Jeff Snider, and he'll be talking Dodgers Phillies with us, and we are excited to have him. And welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
No problem. So my first question is, what are your thoughts on last night's game?
Last night's game was interesting. Just the first game back with the full stadium of fans at Dodger Stadium. The crowd energy was fun to hear, and it was obviously from my perspective probably not as fun from your perspective, but it was fun to see Mookie Betts have a big moment in his first game in front of 52,000 Dodger fans. He had plenty of big moments last year and even some this year, but they were in front of cardboard cutouts or limited fans. And so for him to hit the game-winning homer in his first game in front of a full stadium was pretty cool from a Dodger fan perspective.
What do you think about Zach Eflin and his performance last night?
He was really good. Zach Eflin, he's one of those guys who always surprises me. Like I'll forget he exists, and then I'll watch him pitch and say, "Oh yeah, this guy's actually really good." And seems like he can. He's got a lot of potential to just kind of put things together. He seems like one of those guys. Like I'm trying to think of a good comparison of somebody who just finds it just a little bit later in his career, doesn't kind of take the league by storm when he comes up, but figures stuff out, maybe not to the extent of a Tyler Glasnow, but, a guy who I don't know if he'll ever be as good as Tyler Glasnow ended up, but, a guy who takes a few years to figure it out, but then when he does, he's got the stuff to be really, really good.
Kim, you got anything?
Keep going, Alex. Keep going.
Okay.
You're doing good.
So we know that Bryce Harper went out of the game with a injury. So if he doesn't play tonight, what do you expect the Phillies to do? And you think that will be a bad picture of losing or anything?
Yeah, it's that losing Bryce Harper for any amount of time is always a tough thing to deal with. He's so good. He's he just kind of flies under the radar. It seems like for years he was like at the top of everybody's coming out of everybody's mouth all the time. And it seems like the last year or two he's just kind of flown under the radar, but he's been really, really good. And so that's definitely a big blow to the Phillies if he's not available. I haven't heard anything for sure about whether but you assume coming out of the game with a back issue, you assume he's at least getting the next day off. And so, that obviously there's plenty of major leaguers on the roster, but you saw what they had to do yesterday. You end up with Ronald Torreyes in the game instead of Bryce Harper. And that's offensively, that's a pretty big downgrade. No offense to Ronald Torreyes. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's not quite Bryce Harper in the batter's box. And so, if it's something like that, I mean, you've got, I forgot the guy's name. Left-handed hitter, pinch hit for Brad Miller. Brad Miller. They may figure out a way to slot him in, which takes off some of the offensive hit. Brad Miller is he's still not Bryce Harper in the batter's box, but he's a better hitter than Ronald Torreyes. So they have a few options, but yeah, when you're coming into this game 3 of the series with Zach Wheeler going, that this is the Phillies' best chance to win in this series. And so it's a bummer for them to lose Harper and sounds like possibly Segura too. I just saw something this morning that Gene Segura might be out for the game too. And if, cause I guess he left last night's game late with an injury too. And so, if you're missing Segura and Harper, that it's rough to do that in the game that Wheeler's starting when the Phillies were probably looking at this game as their best shot.
My question is, how is the Dodgers? What were your expectations for the Dodgers going into the season, and have they held up to them so far?
the expectations, it's always hard. You always try to be realistic and temper those expectations a little bit because, I mean, the fact is the Dodgers were really, really good, almost historically good last year, won the World Series, and then on paper probably got better in the offseason. And so you kind of come at like they played at 116 win pace last year. And you try not to come into the season thinking, okay, yeah, maybe they'll win 120 games. And then they started the season 13-2, and you're like, oh, maybe they will win 120 games. And then they hit that rough patch. And so, I think expectations, you kind of had to go in realizing, okay, some of the benefit last year, they only had to play 60 games. So even though they were on 116 win pace, if it had been a full season, they probably would have won 108, and so kind of temper that down a little bit. And then it's like, well, they also had decent luck health wise last year. And, this year they've had really bad luck. And so, even though I came into the season thinking there's a chance they could be historically good, I was really thinking, okay, probably 105 to 110 wins. And right now they're on pace for not that many. They're on pace for probably about 100. And so, I guess you could say they haven't quite lived up to expectations. But the fact is the Giants really have exceeded expectations. And that's why right now the Dodgers are in second place, a game behind the Giants. I think if the Giants weren't exceeding expectations, because the Dodgers are 4 games ahead of the Padres, if right now the Dodgers were in first place, 4 games ahead of the Padres, and the Giants were where we expect the Giants to be, I think we'd be feeling pretty good about where the Dodgers are, not too concerned. And so while the Dodgers maybe haven't totally lived up to the expectations, I think it's more that the Giants have exceeded their expectations. And so it's making things feel a little bit worse for the Dodgers.
Speaking of the Giants, did you see last night the grand slam to put the Giants up 9-8?
Yeah, that was frustrating as a Dodger fan, seeing the Diamondbacks up 7-0, thinking, oh, good, we're finally going to get some help from the Diamondbacks. They'll beat the Giants. The Dodgers can tie the Giants for first place. And then the Diamondbacks remembered they were the Diamondbacks and decided to lose it. But yeah, Mike Yastrzemski, he's a good ball player. He's fun to watch. It's fun. He's a guy who, when I was talking about guys who come on later in their career, he's 30 years old now. He was 28 by the time he made a splash in the big leagues. Even with his pedigree being the grandson of a Hall of Famer, it's kind of crazy that he came out of nowhere. He was, I think, DFA'd by the Orioles in spring training a couple of years ago. The Giants picked him up, and he's been basically their best player since then. So, I'm happy for him, as happy as I can be for anybody who wears orange and black. But, it's if I can remove the emotion of the team ahead of the Dodgers winning a dramatic game. Yeah, that was fun. It's fun for Yastrzemski, fun for their fans. And, I have a lot of friends who are Giants fans, and they have good qualities too. But, so they're happy. So it was fun to watch.
So my next question is, do you see the Phillies getting into the playoffs this year or not?
It's the big benefit they have is being in the National East, where nobody is really taking control. Nobody seems to be interested in really running away with it. The Mets have a decent lead right now. But the Mets are the Mets. They don't hit very well for whatever reason. And so, the Mets are a couple pitching injuries away from really running into trouble, because right now it's DeGrom and Stroman and Walker that are carrying them. And so that could turn, pitchers get hurt all the time. And especially, with all the stuff about the sticky stuff bans from baseball, we saw that Tyler Glasnow got hurt and he blames it on not using the sticky stuff. And Mets players and fans insist that Jacob DeGrom doesn't use the sticky stuff. And maybe that's true. But, whether it's injuries or ineffectiveness, I think throughout baseball, we're going to see a lot of pitchers becoming less effective over the next few weeks. And it's tough to predict who that's going to be. And so, but, with the Phillies being in the NL East, I think they have a chance, but I do think they're probably going to need to win the division in order to make the postseason, because even though the Padres are slumping right now, I think the Padres are still the second best team in the National League behind the Dodgers. And the Giants, I don't expect them to keep up the pace that they've been keeping, but they've built up such a head start that I think chances are, I think there's a really good chance both wild card teams will come from the National League West. And if not, I would think it would be one of them from the NL Central. It's hard for me to picture the East getting a wild card team at this point. And so the Phillies are going to need to win the division if they're going to make the postseason.
So, what's your record prediction for the Phillies?
You know, right now they're what, a game under 500 right now, 32-33, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, I think they are probably a little better than that. You know, we see I'm looking at their record right now. They've been really good at home and pretty darn bad on the road. And I don't know that that's necessarily sustainable. I think chances are their road performance will pick up a little bit. Some of that might be, you know, just the quirks of the schedule, who they've played, all that stuff. And so I would expect, you know, the Phillies haven't had a winning season in several years. Right. They finished 81-81 a couple of years ago. And I think that's as close as they've gotten to a winning season in a while. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is their year for a winning season. I expect them to, you know, probably win 80, 85, 86 games. And that could be enough to win the NL East, depending on if the Mets fall off. But you know, it's probably not enough to get a wild card. So it's going to need to be, and they may need to outperform that by a couple wins. They may need to get to 88 or 89 to win the division.
Yeah. My question is, who have you been the most impressed with on the Dodgers this year? Who do you think have stepped up in a big role?
Max Muncy is the easy answer. He struggled really bad last year. He did step it up in the postseason, hit some key home runs, had some big hits. But this year he's been great offensively and defensively. He's just been a revelation. We saw 2 years ago, he got switched to second base and he turned himself into a good second baseman, which was surprising because he's not built like a second baseman and he's not built like a guy who would be good defensively anywhere. And he had to play second base and became a good second baseman, not a Gold Glover, but a good solid second. He played second base in the All-Star game, you know, and then this year he was back at first base where he's been fine, but he turned himself into an elite defensive first baseman. He may be the best defensive first baseman in baseball this year. It's kind of a bummer that he's hurt right now, so you guys didn't get to see him. But bummer from my standpoint, maybe not so much from your standpoint. But you know, Max Muncy is probably the answer, and then the other one is Chris Taylor, who is just steady, can play everywhere on the field, and you look up at the end of the year and like, oh yeah, he was one of the 30 most valuable players in baseball, and we didn't really even think about him much all year. That's kind of who Chris Taylor is. He doesn't draw attention to himself unless you're watching him every day and seeing how good he is.
You got anything else, Cameron?
I think we're good. Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day.
Anytime, guys. Thanks. Nice to talk to you.
Nice talking to you too.